everyone, welcome to Restitch America. My name is Ohene-Opare, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. This is episode number 22, and today's guest, I'm sure you are all going to fall in love with, because I believe I have, because of the way she speaks very clearly on social media. So we're going to learn a little more about her today. But before we begin, always remember to like, comment, follow, subscribe to our podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then also, please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our channel as well. So we just barely got over, on my personal channel, I got over 1,000 subscribers, so I can now monetize my content, which is a huge milestone for me. But also, don't just follow me, go and follow the Restitch America channel as well. So just look for it on YouTube and make sure you're following. And then also, please share the content. That's the way we can get more and more people involved in this project. And then also, we can grow our audience as much as possible. So let's jump right into today's episode. So today's guest is Kiyah Willis, and she's a fellow at Objective Standard Institute, focusing on cultural trends and their causes and consequences. And you can find her advocating for reason, individualism, and liberty on Twitter and TikTok. And that's where I found her. I found her on TikTok. And her handle on TikTok is Growing in Truth. And then also on Twitter is Growing in Truth. So go look for that. And she also has a Substack, and we will provide all that information in the description of the video, in the description of the podcast as well. So Kiyah, welcome to Restitch America.
Thank you. And congratulations on hitting 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I know that's hard to do, so.
Yeah, the first 1,000 is the hardest, I hope. Hopefully it's smooth sailing from this point forward. All right, so we love to start our shows with a little bit of icebreakers so that we can get to know you a little bit, get everybody comfortable, so we can have a great conversation today. So here's what we're going to start with. First question. Tell me about 3 influential people in your life and how they impacted you.
Yeah, I loved this question when I saw it. Yeah, I think probably the first person who's really influential in my life is my mom, because she has a really positive outlook on life. And me being in kind of the political sphere, sometimes I can be kind of cynical about just things that I see, on the news and on social media. But she reminds me that things can always get better, and that there's always good things to be appreciative for, even when sometimes things feel a little bit bleak in the rest of the world. So I'm really appreciative to have that kind of person in my life. Another person who's in my life who really has been inspirational and influential for me has been my brother, who is very, I think, rational and calm. He tends to look at things for what they are and remove his emotions from situations. And I think, again, just working in politics and things, it can be very easy to let my emotions take over. And so having someone who can kind of keep me grounded in logic and in reason, and kind of separate my emotions from things, is something I really appreciate. And the third person, or maybe it's a group of people, but I think I couldn't pick one. The people who I work with at Objective Standard Institute, kind of all of my coworkers, are so passionate about what they do in working towards improving philosophy in America. And I'm really just inspired by how hard they work towards achieving their goals. And I am trying to be a lot like that, and work hard. So yeah, I think those are the three people who are in my life who have impacted me the most, especially over the last year.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. So before I go to the next question, the next icebreaker question, tell me a little bit about OSI, the Objective Standards Institute, and what their mission is.
Yes. So Objective Standard Institute is, I guess probably the best way to call it would be a like philosophical think tank. We have a bunch of research fellows who uh, work on really rational philosophy. So making sure that everything that we, from morality to policy, is based in fact and reason, and not just subjectively, because I say so, this is true. But what's the data to back this up? What are the facts that we can see in reality that kind of back up what we're talking about? Um, we're also very liberty minded, so very much about uh, personal responsibility, individualism, um, yeah, non-aggression principle, kind of libertarianish, with let people live their lives the way that they want to live their lives. Don't have the government come in and um, tell people really what to do, but also again be like a rational and logical person with your decisions. So those are kind of the messages that we try to spread through our work.
I love that. This is actually funny because I have wanted to be kind of in that space of furthering reason, furthering critical thinking, and furthering all these ideas that I feel are lost. When I listen to politics, for the most part, people talk about personalities. And everywhere you go, it's about this person did this, and therefore Republicans are bad, or that one Democrat did that, and therefore Democrats are bad. And it's all about personalities. And I keep feeling like it's not about the personality, it's about the principles, it's about the values, it's about things that are immutable. Those are the things we need to focus on. Those are the conversations that we need to be having. And I don't care that there is one Republican that you can point to that did not live up to a certain standard, and therefore, you're going to tar and feather the entire political right as a certain way because someone did something. And I've always wanted the conversation to be around the ideas and whether those ideas advance human development or whether they hold us back. And so I love that. I'd love to get into more conversation with you later on potentially how a person like me can get into that world of thinking and coming up with the philosophies to back up the policies that we want to see in government and in society. So that's really awesome. Okay, so next question is, if you could be remembered. I know you're pretty young, I dare say that. But if you've already thought about what your legacy could be, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, I think this is something you said. I'm pretty young, so this might change over time. But I think right now what I'm trying to work towards, or what I wish my legacy would be for standing up for what's right and standing up for truth. I think there are a lot of people right now who want to do what's right and want to do the right thing for themselves and for our this country and for the world and general society, but they are sometimes afraid of um, either social backlash or other things that can get in the way of that. And so I hope to be remembered as someone who wasn't really afraid to stand up for those principles.
That is amazing. So growing up, my dad always had us memorize these quotes that were basically life lessons. And there were two that hung in my living room growing up. One of them said, if you do what is right, you have no need to fear. And then the second one said, do what is right and let the consequence follow. And those two things have always stuck to me. And I've always admired people who are willing to be courageous, to stand up for what they believed and do what is right, even if the consequences are not necessarily, the best. And I think the next generation of Americans have to find their courage. I think something that is lacking, where we want to get along, right? We all want to get along, and this idea of tolerance has become pervasive in negatively pervasive in such a way that people are saying being tolerant means accepting everything and never standing up for anything. And so you could literally have someone, punching someone in the face, and you would say, well, maybe that's how they're expressing their frustration, and coming up with excuses for bad behavior because we're afraid to offend or we're afraid to stand up for what we believe. So I love that, even at this young age, you're thinking, I want to be that courageous person. I want to be that person who is known to stand up for their convictions, because nobody ever achieved anything worthwhile kind of giving up their beliefs and giving up their convictions. Right. All right. So let's jump in to some conversation right now. So to start off, I want the audience to get a little bit about you, to get to know you a little bit. So I know that you've been on social media. I just barely started seeing you, so I don't know if you're new to social media or, but I just barely started seeing you. And the very first time I saw a video of you, I believe I heard you say you were originally from the left side of the political aisle and began to shift. And anytime I've heard that, I want to understand a little bit what causes a person to wake up one day and completely challenge everything they've held for a long time, right? So talking about, having convictions and sticking with those convictions, it usually has to take something monumental to have you completely, do a 180 and go the other way. So can you share a little bit about that experience and how it came to be?
Yeah. So I guess starting with why I was on the left in the first place, that's typically where I start. I so I was kind of raised in um I was raised in actually a fairly conservative area. I'm from Texas. So I went to a Christian religious conservative school, but our school had a very extensive diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) program. And if you're familiar with DEI programs, kind of what you're taught through these programs is what we're talking about with this tolerance is the most important virtue, right? You have to accept everyone and everything at all times. Everyone's truths and beliefs are equally as true and valid, and if you go against someone or tell someone that they're wrong, you're harming them. You're being a terrible person. You're immoral, and so that kind of being the environment that I was raised in. When I eventually went to college, and I started college in 2017, and I went to a university in a very blue, very left-leaning area at a very left university, and I was started to be taught these very left ideas about gender, sexuality, race, the purpose of the government, um, very much taught like socialist ideas that the government should be kind of have their hands in everything that you're doing in your life and should be really running your lives, that everyone who is considered a minority, so whether you're a woman or you're gay or you're black, you are oppressed. The idea that there's a million genders and all of them are valid. All of these things were really taught to me in university, and because I was taught to just kind of blindly accept all of these ideas, I did. I just took all of them as, this is what makes me a good person, is to believe all of these things, and I shouldn't question them. So this is just gonna be my viewpoint going forward. So I became a pretty big activist at my school, in, uh, spreading these ideas of, like, millions of genders. I identified as non-binary when I was in school. I was big on the belief that white people shouldn't say certain things or shouldn't have certain ideas because of their skin color. So I was pretty far into the activism and into those ideas. And it took me having kind of a personal run in with my ideas clashing with reality for me to start to wake up. Um, I Towards the end of my freshman year of college, was I ended up in the hospital, and because I needed 24/7 care from a nurse at that point, I needed to kind of come to the reality that all of these millions of genders aren't real or don't matter. Like biological sex is what matters, and that's reality. And but because I was so kind of indoctrinated into these ideas of not offending people and um, just putting everyone else's feelings kind of above truth, I was afraid to ask for a female nurse when I was in the hospital. And this realization that my ideas and my ideology was conflicting with my safety and with the reality of the situation was kind of the first wake up moment of, oh no, something's wrong. Something that somewhere in my line of thinking or in these things that I believe, there's something that's not right because I shouldn't have to choose between what I believe and, yeah, just my safety and well-being. And that was kind of my first moment of, I need to start really questioning what I believe and what I feel.
Wow. I mean, a lot of times we hear this story from afar, and we say, well, it's happening to that person over there in that corner, and maybe I feel for them, but it's not personal. I don't feel it myself. And having you share this and kind of makes it more real to me. It's no longer intellectual. These are things that people are actually going through. And as a society, the question then becomes, what are we doing? Putting people in this kind of situation where they have to contend with, whether they need to be safe or whether they need to uphold a certain ideology. And that is sad that that is happening. And so I'm very grateful that you shared this, because I think it will give people that inside track or inside view into what is going on in this generation, especially in Gen Z, who at this point are identifying as LGBTQ at a rate of like 20%, meaning 1 out of 5, Gen Z people are saying they are LGBTQ. And the question is, what has happened? Did evolution suddenly speed up and and creates this new phenomenon, or is something else going on that we need to understand and deal with? And one way I look at a lot of these things is, if we're going to have any positive effect, we always have to figure out what our motives are. What is our goal? What is my goal sitting here talking about this issue? What is my goal? Is my goal to denigrate people, to make them feel like, the feelings they're having or the ideas they've been indoctrinated with make them a bad person? And if that is my goal, does it actually achieve what we want in this world? I don't think it does. And I think a lot of people on the conservative side of the aisle want to, point out that this is wrong, and that's true. However, we have to understand that a lot of the people who are going through it, you know, were indoctrinated. It's almost like finding someone who has been kidnapped and then berating them for being kidnapped, right? They have been encompassed with this, and it has, as Elon Musk calls it, the woke mind virus. It's something that has captured captured their minds in a certain way, such that we have to look at them as people who need help to kind of reconstruct their thinking outside of that kind of ideology. And if we look at it that way, then our approach should be compassionate. We should have as much compassion as possible. And so when I look at it, I always think about, I say, if I'm speaking to someone on social media, I'm looking at that person as a potential convert. And if they're a potential convert, then berating them, making them feel little, it's not going to work to get them to see the light. And I'm really glad that you did. Okay, so let's move on from there. So let's continue the story. So you started questioning some of these things, and then I'm sure you had an ecosystem of people who you surrounded yourself with that believed the same kinds of things. So how was the reaction as you began to kind of start questioning things?
The reaction was not good. Um, as as I started questioning things and kind of talking to my friends, some of my professors, some of the adults in my life, there was a lot of pushback. People telling me that I was kind of crazy, making things up. people telling me that I was a bad person for questioning the ideas that were being pushed onto me. Um, and it was really hard because I knew that there was something that was wrong with what I was thinking, with what was happening. Kind of once that cat came out of the bag, it was hard to put it back in and pretend like, nothing was wrong. And the more kind of research that I started to do into things like, specifically the gender stuff was kind of my first catalyst into rethinking things, but I started looking into the way that we're uh, treating sports with, like, Biden had talked about, or not Biden at the time, but the Democrats who were in office had been talking about redoing Title IX, and replacing biological sex with gender identity, um, and the way that these ideas were being taught in schools. At the time, I was training to be a teacher. I'm not a teacher now, but I was in an education program training to be a teacher, and I
You
was
are.
working. I'm not a teacher. Oh, yeah, maybe on a
In a
social media
different
teacher.
way.
um, but yeah, I was working in a middle school, in Boston where I went to school, and I saw these ideas being taught to kids, um, and there was just a lot of red flags that I was seeing with policies and with the way that everything was going, and my friends, the people around me were either telling me, "It's not happening," you know, "These ideas are not being taught to kids, you're crazy," "They're not trying to replace, sex with gender, you're crazy," but then also saying, "But if they were doing it, it would be a good thing, so you should support it, and the fact that you're against it is bad." Um, and this was kind of everyone that I spoke to about this, so I started to question my own sanity at that point, like, "Am I the one who's crazy? Am I making things up? Why am I the only one isn't who seems to see something that other people aren't seeing?" I became pretty depressed during this time because I thought that there was something morally wrong with me, but eventually I I kind of just came to the conclusion that what I was seeing wasn't it was worth doing something about, even if people were going to be upset with me, even if I was potentially going to lose friends over it. And so yeah, that period of time there, I think that there are a lot of people who are going through that right now, a lot of people who are seeing what's happening, but they're afraid to speak out because of maybe the social circles that they're in or the repercussions they think are going to happen. And this is where I think what you said earlier about seeing people as potential converts when you talk to them on social media, I think is so important because there are people who are just really struggling in that in between zone of seeing something's wrong, but not being sure if it's them that's wrong or if it's the ideas that are wrong or what's wrong. And I think that approaching people like that with that compassionate understanding is important to encourage them to speak out and to feel more comfortable with being just honest about what they're seeing.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that that's the approach that we need to take. We should always, vitriol doesn't solve anything. I mean, I haven't seen anybody bashed into a belief in what is right, right? And it takes a lot of love. And one of the things that people I've heard a lot of times is that when people make that switch in their thinking, even if they don't consider themselves conservatives, but if they just make that switch to get away from the ideologies that are being currently pushed on the left, the embrace that they feel on the other side is something that is palpable to them. You know, the people they have been told are the bigots, the people they've been told are the haters, the people they've been told, need to be eliminated potentially from our society. Those people are the ones that embrace. Those people are the ones that say, come over, right? And they put their arms around you and they embrace you. And so what was that like for you? So you got the backlash from your professors and all those people who are bought into that ideology. And then what was the response that you got from the people on, or I say closer to the right, or the people who are conservatives, or people who don't want to stand with some of the ideologies of the left?
Yeah. So it took me a little bit of time to kind of reach out to people who were more on the right. I was really afraid of conservatives, even kind of after rejecting a lot of woke ideas, which took a few years. I started questioning things in 2018. I didn't start reaching out to kind of the right side or looking into the right side of the political spectrum until 2020, 2021. And at that was when I started on social media. No, I started social media in 2022. Uh, when I started reaching out on social media, and created my Twitter account in 2022, that the people who started kind of following me, who I started interacting with on Twitter was where I started on was on Twitter. It was such a 180 from what I was used to. People were so yeah, definitely much more welcoming and open to questioning things and it just the entire way of thinking is so different from the, accept everything that you're told from the government and accept everything that you're told without questioning it. When I moved more towards the right, people are like, question everything, don't accept anything unless you know that it's true, you know that it's right. And so that was really amazing feeling to feel like I was with people who had those same values and same ideas that I did. I just wish that I had done it sooner. Because I think there was a lot of I said there's a lot of time when I was too afraid. I was like, "Oh no, the right, they're bigots, they're racists. I don't want to go over there." And then when I finally did reach out, I finally did start looking into it. I was like, "Wait a second, they're not. These are people with ideas, and actually people with better ideas than what I was believing in. So I should not judge and have an open mind going into it. And I'm so happy I did."
That is great to hear. So one thing that if I have a complaint on the right, my complaint is that we're really bad at PR, like really, really bad
Yeah,
at PR. And
yeah,
that's one of the things I want to change as well, which is that, people on the left are really good. They own Hollywood, they own the culture, they own storytelling, and they own the manipulation of our emotions, right? They own that industry. And so they are able to create things that feel good, but have actually no substance behind them, right? And so it's this feelings generation that we've created where everything is about how I feel, not recognizing that feelings are fleeting. And just because you feel a certain way today doesn't mean that you will feel the same way, tomorrow or the next day. And when you build your life around feelings, you're not building a solid foundation. And I feel personally, I don't have any research to back this, but I feel this is the primary cause of the mental health crisis we're having among Gen Z and the youth, is because everything is feeling. And because everything is feeling, you have no anchor to stand on. And so what happens? I'm going to create an analogy out of the blue right now. It's if you don't have an anchor, then you are moved and tossed by the waves, right? And when you're moved and tossed by the waves, how do you feel? You feel sick inside. You feel, nausea. You feel like something is wrong. And that affects you mentally, right? When that feeling persists, it affects you mentally when you're being beaten to and fro because you have no anchor. And I think that's what we need to be putting out into the world to help people recognize that the anchors that, let's say, the people on the right, or I would say sane people, the anchors that sane people have placed in the water and saying, hold on to this anchor, is not because they want to tie you down. It's because you need a starting point, a foundation upon which you can build your life and your livelihood. And when that foundation is not there, then you are going to be at the whim of anything that comes along. And that is a very unsteady way of life. And that is what is causing, I think, what is causing this kind of unsteadiness, mental unsteadiness in people's lives, because everything's changing every day. And in the thing you were holding on to yesterday is now completely different. And you're a bigot, from one day to the next, because you did not, want to hold on to something new that is being preached. And so I think that's part of the reason why we have a lot of kids who are struggling because there's nothing to hold on to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, your feelings change from day to day, and when you let those control your life, it, like you said, you have no anchor, you know? Um, and yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. So
So, with that in mind, um, what would you say were some differences that you noticed in the ideologies when you came over to, let's say, and right now, I almost want to say, I don't want to call it conservatism. I want to call it sanity. When you came to sanity, right? And one way I've in the past described conservatism is I'm saying that conservatism is the adult in the room. Conservatism is the thing that tells you, hey, you can't have everything you think you want, right? Hey, your resources are limited. Hey, you can't, live off of your feelings. And conservatism is the adults that has to come and be the party pooper every now and then to say, sorry, I get that you are into your feelings and all, but we have to live in reality a little bit, right? Conservatism is the thing that says, hey, no, you don't have an unlimited credit card. You can't pay for all these things that you want, right? Maybe we need to be a little fiscally responsible and think about the future and so on and so forth. So that is sanity. That is not, conservatism, right wing rhetoric. This is just sanity. This is normal things that people should do in life. And so when you became, you came closer to the side of sanity, what did you see in terms of the ideologies that really attracted you?
yeah. So I guess I consider myself to be conservative, but also like libertarian. So as far as politically, I'm very much for like small, limited government, allowing people to really make decisions for themselves when it comes to how they want to live their life, what they want to believe in. And I think, which I do think it can be conservative, like conserving the kind of in the
Mhm.
US, like the constitutional ideas of, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But yeah, I think you named a lot of them, what you were just saying, fiscal responsibility, and being smart with your financial decisions, something that never talked about, when I was on the left. It was always just, "Oh, if you're broke, the government will give you money. Oh, if you spend too much money, someone else should give you money. You shouldn't make good decisions, you shouldn't make wise decisions, rely on other people to bail you out, at all times." Um So that was a big one, was just personal responsibility in general, and the idea that you should do your best to make good decisions to put yourself in the best situation that you can. And sometimes when you make those bad decisions, it's on you to fix them. If you do something that wasn't so smart and puts you in
Are
in
you
a bad
telling me
situation.
systemic racism is not holding you down, Kaya?
No.
It's not?
No, not at all, not at all. Yeah, definitely the systemic oppression ideas, and this idea that there's invisible racism everywhere, invisible sexism everywhere, invisible homophobia everywhere, invisible all of the isms everywhere. Um, yeah, being in a or yeah, kind of moving towards an ideology that just not only doesn't view the world as inherently oppressive, but also just views people as individuals, and that their situations are unique to them. And that, yeah, each person's situation is different and isn't part of some hive mind group that they're in. That was something that was really attractive to me as well on the right. Um, and family values as well, keeping families together as best as possible, and making wise decisions when it came to relationships and marriage and things, which I think is something the left takes relationships so non-seriously, like things like marriage and dating and things, and that also causes a lot of emotional distress. I saw a lot of that in college, not so much with marriage, but with relationships in general. People not treating them very seriously and ending up very hurt and making very poor decisions with those as well. And I think the general idea of the American dream, or trying to uphold the American dream and trying to uphold the idea that people should be able to, yeah, if you work hard, you can be successful, and that we should teach people that working hard can lead to success, and not that, I guess, again, with the systemic oppression thing, that, being part of certain groups means that you're gonna be held back. I think those were really some of the big, uh, ideas that really made me feel like the right was the direction that I should be moving in.
And thank you for sharing that. I think this is the thing that we need to start amplifying. These are the ideas that need to be amplified. How many kids growing up in the liberal bastions of the coasts and in the inner cities are hearing that message, right? They're being drowned out completely. A lot of people are not even giving space for the possibility of a worldview where you live basically in reality, right? Where you understand the world for what it is and you understand human nature for what it is. I think one of the things that I have, maybe somebody said this, I don't know, but this is something that I've come to believe, which is that in order to judge any kind of ideology, you need to judge its respect or disregard for human nature. If you don't understand an ideology's kind of relationship with human nature, then you can't really judge that ideology. And when it comes to, for me, ideas on the left, I find that they are, for the most part, set up to defy human nature. And when you defy human nature, you're left with chaos and distress, right? Human nature is not some malleable, randomness that can be molded into anything that you want. And so when you think about ideas from the left, it's this idea that, we want to get into this, utopic society. And in order to do so, we can enact policies. And if we can just nudge people, and if they're not willing to nudge, if we can just push them, they will know they don't really know what is good for them. If we can just push them into this direction, we can create this perfect society. And I'm like, that is antithetical to human nature. And any policy that is built on principles that are against human nature are never going to work, no matter how noble the goals are. And so that's something we need to watch. And then also, I always judge policies by its actual effect on the lives of people. So another thing that I've noticed on the left is that they judge their policies by its intention and not by its effect. And so if they come to you and they say, hey, guess what? We want to eliminate poverty. And then you say, okay, what are your ideas? Well, let's give money to people who need money. And I'm like, okay, how has that worked over the last 30 years? They're like, well, it's not about that. It's about that mom who needs, formula for their baby. And I'm like, okay, I get that. I get that the mom needs formula for her baby, and let's provide that immediate assistance. But what is the long-term plan? Has this worked? Has that changed anybody's lives? Or has it made people more dependent on the government such that they can no longer, fend for themselves? What exactly is your goal? Are you trying to create minions for the government such that people are, have to respond in a certain way because their livelihoods are tied to certain policies that the government is pushing, right? And so where does freedom really come in when you make people dependent in such a way that they cannot make independent decisions without worrying about losing their livelihoods? And so those are the principles that I think we need to be able to espouse. But I feel like conservatives are not doing too well in doing that because we usually come off as callous. We usually come off as unfeeling. We usually come off as people who are not caring for the poor and the needy, people who are not Christ-like, because Christ was all about caring for the poor and the widow and the fatherless, and our principles sound like that. And that's where I feel like people like you and your generation have a special opportunity to bring the compassion that is needed, but also remain in the facts as well. And that's why I am impressed with people like you and the work you're doing for our country and for the next generation. People like us, I'm not that old. I'm only 39, but I'm still probably considered, too old to be talking to the Gen Zers. So we need people like you to carry that torch and change the nature of that conversation so that we can begin to reach the heart of the next generation, because maybe it would be more difficult to reach their minds at this moment.
Yeah.
We first have to go through their hearts, get them there, and then help them understand that we truly do care about their well-being. And then maybe from there, we can begin to espouse some of the facts that are necessary to kind of change their mindset. Okay, I know I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to come back to a couple of final questions. So what are some political issues that you are most passionate about? And how can we kind of get involved in those issues? If you were talking to our audience, what would you say?
Yeah, I guess the political issues I'm the most passionate about would be, well, one would be uh protecting kids from a lot of these ideas. I think our education system is a mess, in the way that it teaches kids a lot of the things that we talked about earlier, that they're victims, and that their lives are dependent on what other people think of them, and that their feelings are how they should be living their lives. Um, I think one of the things that, well, maybe if anyone in the audience is like a parent, and I'm not a parent, so take this as you with as much as you think my opinion is worth. But one of the things that I kind of wish that my parents would have done would have been to instill a lot of those values in me at home, instead of kind of relying on my school. Even though I said a more conservative religious school, those weren't really values that I learned there. So I think doing more work at home with families to kind of make sure those values are instilled in kids is something that's really important. Um, I think individualism is another thing that I'm really passionate about, just treating other people as individuals, judging them for kind of the content of their character instead of their immutable characteristics. And I think that it starts with just individual people um, following those ideas, and um, yeah, just spreading those messages themselves. It really takes individual people, um, like a bunch of individual people to make a big, massive change, right? You don't need to change everyone's minds. If you can change a few people's minds, and those people can make a ripple effect. So I think having conversations with people in your everyday life, um, acting the way that you want other people to act, kind of being that example. I think those are kind of the things that people can do to start making a change.
Thank you for sharing that. One thing I try to live by is something that Jesus said to his disciples. He said, "Love one another as I have loved you." And then he said, "By this shall men know that ye are my disciples." So he says, go into the world, right? And be a representative of my love and my compassion. And I think that should be the basis of everything that we do. Because if we don't have a genuine care and concern for the people we're advocating for, then everything we do is seen as fake. And if it is fake, people are not going to trust us. And so it's not about power. I know a lot of politics is about power. And I believe for conservatives, I mean, there are individuals who are about power, but I believe conservatism is about returning power to the individual. It's about telling the individual that you have more power than you think, and not relinquishing that power to a third party, not relinquishing your mind to a third party, not relinquishing your values to a third party, that you can create a foundation in your own life that can bring positivity into the world. And so, my handle on social media is willful positivity. And you said in the beginning that your mom is this positive person. That is the kind of interaction that we need to have in the world, rather than having the world influence us and determine how we feel. What about we push positivity into the world? What about we push that excitement? Because if what we're doing is right, then people should see it in the way we live our lives, right? If our lives are miserable, then how do we attract people to the life that we're asking them to shift to? And so we have to embody the things that we believe. And I think the strength of your conviction is only as great as your willingness to defend it. And that is what we have to do. We have to get out there and do so. So Kiyah, thank you so much for joining us today. This is just the beginning of our interaction. And my hope is that we will keep in touch going forward. I know a lot of times, people come on a show and then that's the last time they talk and it's over. This is not about getting views. This is not about, just, one video, one episode. This is about creating a movement of like-minded people who want to change that narrative, who want to open people's eyes. And so I would love for you to be part of that movement with me. I know you're already doing that, but I am inviting you to kind of join the cause and make yourself available as needed so that we can begin to kind of gather up all these patriots who are, trying to make those changes that we want to see in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on this podcast. And yeah, I want to be part of the movement. I hope that we do keep in touch as well and continue to collaborate in the future.
That's definitely what I'm looking forward to. So thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Restitch America. And if you enjoyed the show, please remember to like, subscribe, and follow Restitch America on all the social media platforms. Thank you so much once again. And last week I said that I was going out of town. So I'm going to give you just a little bit more information about that, which is I'm actually going out of the country. And while I'm there, I'm going to be doing some recording. So for the next 2 weeks, there's not going to be any new episodes of Restitch America. But when I get back from my trip, I'm going to be showing you some of the things that where I went, and then also some of the things that I was able to do while I was there. So look forward to that. Come back in 2 weeks. And until then, have a great day. We'll talk to you later.